Imagine a moment when all the laws of physics, time, and space cease to function, when familiar reality dissolves, leaving you alone with something different. This is exactly what happened to Samantha Clark, name changed on that fateful day of February 14th, 2018, when her heart stopped for 6.5 minutes during a routine surgical procedure. The first thing she felt after her consciousness separated from her body was not an absence of sensations, but their strange intensification. Darkness, but not merely an absence of light. Something dense, tangible, like liquid coal enveloping her from all sides. And sound. No, not silence. Myriads of voices speaking simultaneously in all the world's languages, and yet in none of them at the same time. A whisper that doesn't soothe, but penetrates directly into consciousness, filling it with alien thoughts. And then she saw her. At first, just a silhouette in the distance. But as her, if this word still had meaning in that place, consciousness adapted, the details became clearer. A dress, once luxurious, now hung in tatters. The crown, a symbol of power she wore in life, was now crooked, as if struck on the head. And the face. Oh, that face. Familiar features known to the whole world, but distorted by eternal torment. Queen Elizabeth II, but not the one who smiled from portraits. This was her shadow, or perhaps something more terrible, her true essence, freed from all earthly masks. But the most horrifying thing wasn't her appearance. It was what she was doing. She sat on something resembling a throne, and continuously, with manic persistence, was signing nothing. Her hand moved across non-existent parchment. Her lips moved, uttering non-existent decrees. And around her, dozens, hundreds of similar figures. All of them repeated some actions from their earthly lives, but these actions no longer had any meaning. This was hell, but not the kind described in religious texts. This was something much more subtle and therefore much more terrifying. Now, when Samantha tells this story, her voice trembles. "They're still there," she whispers. "And so is she. She's still signing those papers, and will be doing so forever." Before we continue delving into this incredible account, it is important to understand what you are about to hear is not a work of fiction. This is a documented case that we have investigated for 14 months, verifying every detail, every single word. Samantha's story began on an ordinary winter day when she was admitted to St. George's Hospital in London for a routine gallbladder surgery. Nothing foreshadowed complications. A 42-year-old woman, non-smoker, moderate alcohol consumer, with excellent health indicators. But at 11:23 a.m., according to medical records, she experienced a sudden anaphylactic reaction to anesthesia that led to cardiac arrest. 6 minutes and 30 seconds. That's exactly how long her heart stopped beating. 6.5 minutes that forever changed her perception of reality. When doctors managed to restart her heart, the first words they heard from the patient were, "She's still signing them. Why isn't anyone listening to her?" What makes this case particularly valuable for researchers of near-death experiences? First, Samantha had never shown interest in either monarchy or occultism. She worked as an architect, was far removed from politics, and according to her husband, couldn't even remember who the current prime minister was. Second, her description shows striking parallels with other documented cases of dark, near-death experiences. Dr. Raymond Moody, a pioneer in near-death experience research, identifies 7 common characteristics of such experiences: the sensation of leaving one's body, feelings of peace, or in some cases, terror, entering a tunnel, encounters with spiritual beings, a life review, approaching a boundary or limit, reluctance to return. In Samantha's case, we see remarkable alignment with this framework, but with unique features that make her account particularly valuable. But what truly sets this case apart is the specificity of details. Samantha didn't just describe some important figure. She specifically identified Queen Elizabeth II with nuances that an ordinary person would hardly notice. For example, she mentioned the distinctive way the Queen held her imaginary pen between her middle and index fingers, which was her recognizable habit when signing official documents. Let us now examine in more detail the actual place where Samantha found herself. In her description, it was not a space in our conventional understanding. There was no up or down, no cardinal directions. And yet, there was a strange sense of structure and organization present. It was as if the laws of physics operated there, but in a completely different manner. The smell was the first thing that struck Samantha. She describes it as a mixture of formaldehyde, old parchment, and an English rose. This paradoxical aroma made her nauseous, even though in that state she didn't possess a physical body in the usual sense. Interestingly, similar descriptions of smells appear in other accounts of dark near-death experiences. The sound environment was even stranger. Imagine the noise of a huge stadium where tens of thousands of people are speaking simultaneously, but instead of words, only whispers. This sound didn't come from any particular direction. It was omnipresent, as if the darkness itself was producing these sounds. Occasionally, individual voices would grow louder, but they never formed coherent speech. And finally, the visual aspects. Samantha emphasizes that there was no light in the conventional sense in that place, and yet she could see. Moreover, not in the way we see in the world of the living. There were no concepts of near or far. She could discern details of figures at indeterminate distances, as if the space was simultaneously infinite and extremely compressed. The queen, if it was indeed her, sat on something resembling a throne, but it wasn't a majestic symbol of power, rather its parody. Wood that was once gilded, now rotten with pieces falling off. On her head, something vaguely resembling a crown, but deformed, as if it had been misused for a long time. But the most terrifying aspect was her actions. She continuously proclaimed something, nodded to imaginary subjects, made hand movements as if signing documents. Only, no one responded. Her words were lost in the general murmur. Her gestures met with no reaction. It was an eternal, meaningless ritual, devoid of any substance. Samantha recounts that at some point she realized this wasn't punishment in the traditional sense. It was an endless repetition of the essence of earthly life, but stripped of context, meaning, or purpose. Each figure in that place reproduced what had formed the basis of their earthly existence, but in an absolutely hollow form. Later, when we studied this aspect of her experience, we discovered striking parallels in ancient spiritual texts. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the bardo state, where souls see projections of their attachments. In Buddhist tradition, there is the concept of samsara, the cycle of repeated existences. Even Dante, in the Divine Comedy, describes sinners endlessly repeating their earthly passions. When Samantha began regaining consciousness in the hospital room, her first words were not about pain or fear of death, but specifically about how she is still there. Doctors recorded an unusual condition. While her body was physically recovering, mentally she displayed all the signs of profound trauma. We consulted with several experts to understand the nature of this experience. A professor of theology from Oxford University noted striking similarities with medieval descriptions of purgatory, where souls undergo purification from earthly attachments. A psychiatrist from Cambridge pointed to parallels with Jung's theory of archetypes, particularly the shadow archetype. But the most interesting explanation came from a neurophysiologist at University College London. According to his theory, at the moment of clinical death, the brain may activate special neural networks responsible for our sense of self. In this state, consciousness deprived of external stimuli begins projecting outward our deepest self perceptions. Samantha's personal transformation following this event deserves special attention. She no longer fears death as the cessation of existence, but now she is terrified of not having enough time, not enough time to understand what truly matters, not enough time to shed social masks, roles, and expectations, because her experience suggests after death we may face not divine judgment, but ourselves, with all our unconscious attachments, unrealized ambitions, and unfulfilled roles. Philosophers from Plato to Heidegger have spoken of inauthentic existence. But what if after death we encounter precisely this inauthenticity, an eternal reproduction of what was never our true essence? This story is not an answer, but an invitation to profound reflection. If the afterlife, or its projection, truly reflects the essence of our earthly existence, what conclusions should we draw? How should we live here and now? Which of our daily actions, thoughts, and aspirations are truly important, and which are merely social masks behind which we hide our true nature? If this topic has interested you, please subscribe to our channel. Ahead lies many more documented testimonies, scientific studies, and philosophical contemplations about the deepest mysteries of human existence. This story was told from the words of an eyewitness. All personal details have been altered at her request, but the essence of the experience has been preserved in its entirety. We have verified medical records and interviewed doctors and relatives to confirm the reliability of this testimony. Because some truths are too important to remain silent about. As one sage said, those who understand death better comprehend life. Let us together seek this knowledge, grounded in facts, science, and the personal accounts of those who have glimpsed the other side.